Welcome to Rishi Research live stream on VMWorld Recap 2020. So I have with me Rob Hirschfeld and Gina Rosenthal. Rob is ready to jump in, and Gina will be joining us soon. And we're going to talk about what happened in VMworld last week. And this is going to be an exciting discussion, especially knowing how well Rob and Gina are proficient in the organization. This is going to be an exciting discussion going forward. Rob, welcome to the show. Thanks for taking your time.
I'm excited to be here. This has been an exciting season of announcements, so there is a lot to discuss, and looking forward to getting into it. Yeah.
Awesome. Rob, before we get started, can you introduce yourself and talk briefly about what got you into VMworld?
I'd be happy to. So I'm Rob Hirschfeld, CEO and co-founder of a company, and we specialize in data center automation. So we help companies run their data centers more efficiently, and so we provide all sorts of automation for that. Specifically around VMware, we are really an underlay for what VMware is doing in the data center. So we help people build at scale vCenter clusters, all the way up through VCF and vSAN and NSXT and all of these exciting technologies that really bring a lot of resilience and security into VMware. So for us, and we are VMware partners, for us, VMworld is a chance to see what our customers are trying to get out of VMware and where they want to take those technologies. And then that influences us for where we're going to get asked to expand and innovate behind them.
Awesome. Gina has joined us, and welcome to the show. And can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, I'm Gina Rosenthal, and I am the founder of Digital Sunshine Solutions. I've worked forever for the Federation, so Dell, EMC, and VMware most recently, and then I decided to create my own company where I can help other organizations with whatever product marketing needs they have is pretty much what it boils down to, and working a little bit on digital literacy on the side.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Krish Subramanian. I am the founder of Rishi Research. We are an independent analyst firm focused on cloud technologies. And VMware is interesting for me because I am advocating multi-cloud as the future for enterprises, and I've been following VMware closely on what they're doing there. And I've seen some really interesting announcements about VMware on AWS, Azure, and Oracle Cloud, and that VMware Tanzu is right now available on AWS. I think their multi-cloud strategy is pretty interesting. Initially, I thought probably maybe cloud is the one that's going to disrupt them, but I think they have come up with a really good strategy to sort of make themselves relevant in this field. So let's get started. What are some of the announcements that really caught your attention during last week?
Oh, there's a couple. I know one that Gina and I have actually been going back and forth on a bit already is Project Monterey, which is their SmartNIC conversation. I think that one really stands out because of how much broader interest there was from other vendors, and really where things go. I think that the Tanzu announcement they had were sort of interesting. SaltStack is worth discussing from that perspective. So there was a lot. I'd be interested in Gina's take.
Well, the one that totally dragged me down the rabbit hole was Project Monterey for sure. I think it was really interesting. That really kind of hearing about it first was during a keynote with Pat and Jensen, the CEO of NVIDIA, right? So kind of made it, for me, a little bit more confusing. What is this? And of course, talking to Kit, he was going to go read my blog post and tons of information there. And then thankfully, I was on
Tech Field Day.
Tech Field Day Extra. And that was great because I got a little bit deeper dive from one vendor, what exactly that is. So Lots still to dive into, but I think for me, why it was so interesting is it's based on technology that I was working with when I was working on the vSphere team, talking about HPC and how compute can be virtualized. But that
So
was
why can't you unpack that announcement for us so that we all can understand what you really understood from that conversation?
Well, you wrote a blog post, Rob. You go first.
I did, because the TLDR on the blog post is that this is a bigger announcement than most people might think. But let's back into that assessment. So, what Project Monterey is really focused on something called SmartNICs, which I would define as supervisory computers in the way they're thinking about it. So what they've been doing is taking this. Basically, it's a computer that runs on a card inside of the inside of the bigger server, and then it has VMware hypervisor on it. So ESX runs on that card, and then it provides network virtualization, storage virtualization, GPU virtualization. So it's basically allows the server to think it has physical resources that it might not have. So classic, it's virtualization, but it is more true virtualization. And so that ends up being a very, very powerful story in the mix for those pieces. People should be familiar with something called Nitro in AWS, which is, to me, where a lot of people in the industry are trying to catch up to. AWS says, and I believe it, that they don't actually run the hypervisor on the servers. They run it in their Nitro supervisor card. And so a lot of what we're trying to do is offload all these supervisory functions into the card, out of the main processor and into a secondary supervisory system. And so it's an evolution. It started in the SmartNICs from that perspective. And we can talk about NVIDIA, because I think NVIDIA is an important component with this if we need to.
I think for sure NVIDIA is an important component, right? So NVIDIA acquired, I started doing a little bit of reading, because I think there's like a base level of technology that needs to be discussed here. And I have bits and pieces of it in my head, but definitely know who to talk to at VMware that I need to get their brain down. But NVIDIA acquired Mellanox. Mellanox came up with this concept of DPUs. And that being their version of a SmartNIC. And I'm still trying to remember, I've got actually a Mellanox blog post from 2018 pulled up that really talks through all of this, because it talks through the different, at that time 2 years ago, and I don't know if it's changed, what kind of programmable SmartNICs there were, because they call them SmartNICs, some people call them iNICs. Mellanox calls theirs DPUs, and that's of course what NVIDIA is now rolling with. So, what exactly is this, and what does that mean? And I know when I was working on it, what I worked on was, and I was, of course, the product marketer, so I wasn't the working on it. I was the explaining it person. But was how can you virtualize HPC? And the way HPC works is you've got lots and lots of normally bare metal servers, and the scientists, the data scientists and the HPC scientists, all of that genre of people that are trying to extract data, they don't want anything else. They don't want virtualization layer on it. They just want it to run bare metal as fast as it can. And we were proving that you could use these cards to put virtual machines together that would give you a better performance than bare metal in some cases, depending on the type of HPC architecture that you were using for your application. And kind of the same way that you got better performance once you figured out how to really use vSphere with Oracle, kind of the same kind of thing. You have a little bit of payoff, you might have a little bit of performance hit, but you'll have a great big payoff in management. But there's a ton of just tons of this. This already works. They've been using it for HPC for 4 or 5 years. Now, just kind of revisiting for what this SmartNIC is. If this is what brings, and the people that we talked to yesterday were Pensando. They were at Techville Day. I thought that presentation was fantastic. A couple of things that struck me is, number one, the board of Pensando John Chambers is the head of the board. It's all ex Cisco C-level people that have come together to build this company. What they want to do is like, okay, the public cloud does this a certain way behind the covers, and they put it all in the network. The network is not necessarily the IP network. The network is a network connecting the LAN network, like connecting things together. So they thought, well, why leave it to the cloud companies to just do it in the public cloud? Can't we do it ourselves in the private cloud? Like, can't we do this? And so they're taking those programmable NICs, and a gross, terrible oversimplification of what they do is basically they're doing the programming and making sure that they're in an ecosystem that's connecting to all the things you'll have, like VMware, for example. And that's why they were a big part of the announcement, and why Kit actually came on to Tech Build Day to talk to us again yesterday, too.
So you talked about the performance hit for the management advantage. So what kind of performance hit you're talking about?
I have to go back and read the papers, and I know that by the time I left, which was a year ago, the MP, and this is strictly HPC, so AI, ML, DL, right? And there was not a performance hit anymore for most applications, HPC applications. It was, you would get better than bare metal performance if you virtualize with vSphere. But unless you were using something like MPI, which is one of those architectures where you've got lots and lots of machines, and the way the algorithm works is the machines are talking back and forth to each other to make the decisions. So really chatty. But by the time I left, the performance was negligible. And it was like, well, if you don't want to have to manage all these machines, you might as well use vCenter to manage it.
I was going to say, so what you're describing is it sounds like people are like, how can virtualized be faster than bare metal? The reality is we have 20 years of tuning CPUs to be virtualized. And so there are NUMA boundaries, which is how memory is optimized inside of a processor, that are specifically controllable for virtualized partitions. And so, right, because in a lot of cases when HPC, high performance computing, is specially optimized for the systems it's running on. Most general purpose compute does not do a very good job managing memory. It has to wait for things to come from network and from storage and things like that. And most CPUs are not very busy. And so CPUs are designed, this is core to how VMware actually creates benefit. Most CPUs are designed to put something on the side and let it wait and then do other work with the CPUs while that is happening. And that's a core architecture thing. What we've actually been also doing at the server level, and I can't believe we're going this deep, but it's relevant for how the industry is structured. We've also been improving the interconnect bus on these systems. So we've been getting more and more power, general purpose use out of the interconnect bus behind the CPU. So the thing you plug in cards to connect GPUs or storage devices into that system. And that's been getting more performant and more flexible. And so we've reached a point where we can actually add a card that then creates composable infrastructure. And that's a lot of where this is going. This idea that I can software define storage, networking, GPUs, compute. And this evolution that Gina's right, has been slow coming, is really saying, hey, wait a second, I've got a server architecture that I can control without having a process on the server itself, and I've got this generic bus that I can actually create software-defined devices that look like real devices. And that's now converging into a new server architecture. And VMware's been in the middle of sort of enabling that technology and decoupling for the last 10 years, just quietly.
And if you think,
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I think if you think about it, like, we don't build architectures just because they're cool and, hey, look, we can put all this on the I/O bus and we can program it. This is amazing. We should do it. We don't do architectures for that. These architectures are developed and we build them once they're available to support applications. So the one I'm familiar-ish with are these HPC applications. So I know that this was already going on. I knew they were using different types of cards to connect VMs together to build these HPC. But think about, containerized apps. Containerized apps, are they really going to run that great on a server? It's not a 3-tier application. And I think that's where a bunch of us are stuck still. Like, here's how we developed a data center. If all that's getting blown out of the water, of course the server architecture is going to be different. And of course the way we architect it's going to be different. The way virtualization works with it's going to be different. So it's kind of like we're in this stage that, okay, we're going forward, and we've got to all figure out what this really looks like on-prem, because the cloud's got it figured out. They just keep it locked up. We don't know what they're doing underneath the IaaS level, right?
So, based on what you said, I get a feeling that maybe this will eventually move to other use cases apart from what they're doing with HPC. So, we may get near no impact kind of performance or for managing other workloads too. Am I right?
Well, okay, so I want to say a couple of things. One thing the Kit said yesterday that was not clear during VMworld in the announcements, what they announced for Project Monterey is a tech preview, which means they don't have a way to sell it. They're trying to figure it all out, but they wanted everybody to know about this stuff. And they've got partners that are ready to go, right? So they've got the card partners, they've got server partners, all of that are going to work with them to figure it out. So that's number one. Number two, what I was saying to make this comparison that vSphere could already do it, that's the core management system for ESX, right? So it's been able to do it for this kind of work together, kind of using these cards and virtualizing these cards. I was like, when I went to vSphere, I was amazed that vSphere had kept up, like every innovation in hardware it's kept up with. As it comes out, it's ready to be virtualized or ready to be consumed but in a virtual manner. So I think that people that have these types of applications have a way to use vSphere and VMware already if they want to as part of their architecture. I think this is my thinking, I might not be right, but I think what Project Monterey is a way to make this something that is consumable for everybody, not just somebody that's got this amazing engineering team, and an amazing ops team, and they all work together. But for everybody, if you've got vSphere, here's a way to get this done. And I think that's why it's still a project, why you see the ecosystem, people wrapping their heads around it. And I think you could probably do it now, but it's probably not easy, and you'd have to have a good team to figure it out right now.
I think it still has a ways to go. But this has always been, here's the challenge, and this is why SmartNICs have been around for a while, but not particularly interesting to most people, is to program a SmartNIC, you actually have to know how to program the SmartNIC. And it's specific to the SmartNIC, right? It's deep programming. It's right. So the SmartNIC vendors, to create an ecosystem more broadly, are going to have to create basically just for SmartNIC, network function virtualization. So they're going to have a way to say, oh, here is a VM, and I can just put in a firewall into that space, and then it becomes pretty simple to program. People know how to build a firewall.
Yes.
And so what we're moving towards here is the idea that I'm going to have function virtualization, server function virtualizations, network storage, compute, GPU, and then if I can do that generically, then I just build glue VMs and do that. This is a very well understood function chaining capability that the telcos have been doing for network functions, say out of OpenStack and VMware in their data centers, where they have to connect a whole bunch of network operations together. We're just doing it on side of now. That's the big advance here, is that we're actually doing it inside of a virtualization platform, where it's just it's a more modular way to do it, and people understand that module. Right.
Let's now shift gears a little bit, probably to a topic which I am more familiar, which is cloud. So even though the pundits dream of public cloud completely disrupting the entire infrastructure market hasn't come true, public cloud has been gaining a lot of traction, and VMware is trying to get a foothold there. Do you think VMware has got foothold in the cloud market so that they don't have to let go of that vertical too?
I think it's undeniable that they have been very successful in making VMware a common platform across all of these hyperscale clouds. a couple of years ago that this looked like more of a desperation play, and they've actually succeeded in becoming a required infrastructure in all of the major cloud positions. It's not as clear if this has the stickiness and the long-term play for those vendors as you might think. Although the fact that all of the major clouds have come online as VMware providers indicates that there's something that the VMware customers are asking for in these hyperscale cloud spaces.
Yeah. That sort of brings
clearly
to the next question I had in mind. I really see value. If you're a VMware customer, I really see value in using VMware. Otherwise, let's say if you're not a VMware customer, why would you use VMware for your cloud journey? Like, is there any solid reason why? Because recently Keith did a blog post talking about the cost involved, which the productivity cost, which we don't consider if you're going to use VMware to manage cloud. So there are so many factors that are there. Like, why would someone who is not a VMware customer really jump into the VMware bandwagon? Is there any?
If they're not a VMware customer, right? If they're a cloud customer, my assumption would be that they're a private cloud, not a private, cloud native, right? So they're already used to containers and functions and like all of that stuff. So I think the only way someone like that would do that if they needed to come to ground. It's going to depend on what they're trying to do. So like if they've got something and now they want to be in an edge data center because of whatever reason for their application and to serve their users, then they would want to consider VMware because the cost of managing it not on VMware is going to be expensive. If they're going to use like a colo center and rent space, they're probably going to get a virtualized version of whatever they have, just like they would have in the cloud. So I honestly kind of think like that question is like, it's weird. We're in this weird space where we're in the in-between times in many, many ways. Like from an infrastructure perspective, we're in this in-between time where we're still trying to figure out, is it private cloud or not anything, bare metal, and then cloud? Is that the only choices I have? And at some point it's going to change and it's going to be, I have this containerized application. Where's the best place for me to put it? It's not going to matter if it's cloud, in my data center, on the edge, on little tiny devices. It's just going to be my application needs to go the best place it needs to be to do its job as an application or to serve my customers. So we're in this weird in-between time that I know it might matter right now, but I don't know if it matters in the future.
Yeah, I think I agree with that kind of a statement. In fact, we haven't even considered edge and IoT into picture at all. Like once we bring all that in, I think once there is a level of maturity, I think the underlying infrastructure doesn't matter whether it's cloud or private cloud or edge. It doesn't matter. What matters is the performance and how it serves the user experience.
And well, I'm not even. I think performance is a factor, but what we're describing here is what I've been starting to call distributed infrastructure, right? So customers really don't want to be told this is Amazon, manage it this way. This is Google, manage it this way. This is on premises or edge, manage it this ways 4, 5, and 6, and VMware has the dominant footprint in doing that. And so if you are trying to create some operational consistency across this distributed infrastructure estate, the idea that you can operationally use common tooling across all those clouds, it actually provides a really significant value. And I don't want to sell VMware short. The performance of EXS infrastructure and what they've done on those machines is really, really significant. So there's benefits, for consistency across of this estate, and I think that's something that you really can't underestimate. We're talking about Kubernetes a ton, about this is the multi-cloud cloud portability way. Having the APIs that VMware provides, and it's not just ESX, right? It's NSXT. They have some really significant technology with networking that you don't have native in a lot of these clouds. We we could spend a whole bunch of time, and I'd get quickly out of my depth on the new changes on NSX. But NSX actually in this VMworld had a significant enhancement with NXT, how they've embedded it deeper into the platform, what they're doing for distributed multi-cloud cross boundary networking. They made some amazing enhancements to truly make networking cross-cloud more seamless. And we're not, we don't even have time to go into that as an important technology. So there's a lot there.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with the earlier point you made about the distributed infrastructure. I call it distributed app infrastructure, where I think a developer or an architect should be able to define what kind of infrastructure their app needs, independent of whether you're using cloud or edge or whatever it is. Like they define it within a sort of a unified operational interface. They either write to a API or a visual interface. I don't care, but the operational side is completely like abstracted away, and then it automatically takes care of the infrastructure based on what the application needs. I think there should be a tied to the application too as we go about doing it. Maybe VMware is trying to do that with Tanzu, but what do you think? VMware, where is VMware going with their Tanzu strategy?
Gina, do you want to take the first whack at that pinata?
No.
I'm happy to do it.
Yeah.
So Tanzu was the big announcement for last time, and they were really working on embedding containers deeply into the platform. And I didn't feel like there were a lot of new Tanzu announcements in this session. However, there was a lot of Tanzu use in this session. And so what I really think we've seen coming in here is that Tanzu is getting into people's hands as a product mix for VMware. The thing that I would caution is that, and this is one of the things I regret about what VMware has done with Tanzu. Tanzu is not Kubernetes into VMware. It's Kubernetes deeply embedded into VMware. And you don't get Tanzu without going to the very top of a tower of VMware integrated components. And so to me, what that's doing is it's slowing down the adoption for this stack of technologies. Now, the benefits are very real because you get storage into containers, which in Kubernetes is not a particularly robust infrastructure. You get networking, which in Kubernetes is not particularly robust. Right? Kubernetes and storage and network are usually solved with a whole bunch of sidecars and special projects and things like that. And VMware has actually been building a more integrated whole. But since you have to climb the tower of VMware VCF, the Virtual Cloud Foundation's pieces, to get there, I just think fewer customers have gotten to the point where they're really seeing the benefits from Tanzu at this point.
I think I'd agree with that. And I think if I think about, just the sales teams that are kind of tasked with going to customers with this and even back to marketing teams, and this is not just a VMware problem, but this whole digital transformation, somebody had to say this whole series of things. You've got people that don't know what the heck we're talking about, and not just the salespeople and marketing people. You've got technical people that don't understand what the heck we're talking about. So I think it's one of these times where it's really hard to see past the top line mission of where the company wants to go versus what can it do for me, what technically can do these technologies do for me, and which is the best choice for my environment. And I don't see a lot of content coming out on that. I see a lot on the very, very high, like just like you were saying, Rob, like buy everything and you get this, and not that this is how it works. Because at this point, I think one of the things we haven't talked about especially with cloud adoption, VMware is ubiquitous. vSphere is ubiquitous, right? That from an enterprise perspective holds most of enterprise workloads. They run on ESXi, right? Those workloads are valuable. Are those workloads going to get broken up into containers? Or are they going to stay on these old applications and then we'll get more workloads on top of them with containers? That's what everybody's after. Everybody's after control of those workloads with people. So if you think about who's running, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, this is what makes Tanzu a missed story, a missed opportunity for the market, is that in digital transformation, and Gina, you're right to bring this in, we're not converting apps into microservices, wave your magic wand and then it's happening. What's actually going on is that we're taking microservices out of larger apps. Some of those applications stay where they are. Those are going to be in VMs. Some are going to be in containers. And the story, the opportunity of the story for Tanzu is actually that it's a hybrid in the container and VM strategy from an application development perspective. And it actually can help companies make that transformation. That's not the story that I hear VMware telling out of, you're shaking your head.
I
this
agree.
is the sad thing. This is the story here is that we're actually helping, right? VMware has the opportunity to help companies do this migration by saying you don't care if it's in VMs or you don't care if it's in containers, and you shouldn't. But I still feel like they made Tanzu, require so much new technology from VMware. It requires NSXT, I believe, too. So it's not like you can just snap your fingers and implement it, and that makes it harder.
Even if you step back from that, right? Tanzu's not for the operator, not really, right? It's not for a traditional 3-tier application operator anyways, right? It's not for the people that are going to control the VMs. It's not for the people that are going to control all of that VCF, if you want to go that far, architecture. It's for whoever's doing, whoever's going to be with the DevOps team, who's going to manage those applications sitting on top of that environment. That's what Tanzu's for. It's not for the traditional vSphere audience. And I think that's where it gets confusing too. And also it's confusing to an ops person because it's like, oh, cool, I know vSphere. I've got my certs. I can totally do the Tanzu thing. And they probably can, but the thing is that's not how it's going to work probably in an organization. And when you look at things like Project Monterey, now all of a sudden you have this new introduction of new infrastructure into these servers. So sysadmins and network admins and your traditional ops people are more important than ever to figure out how do you keep this base level running so it informs whatever's on top of it, and then Tanzu takes over from there or whatever. And so I don't think there's really the roles that people will play, and I think they'll be mushed up, and it wouldn't be this crazy. But like if you've been a sysadmin for 20 years, your expertise is needed more now than ever to get through this next phase of computing. Leave containers out of it. Leave Kubernetes out of it. Just being able to understand how to set these boxes up and to keep them running and keep them going. That's just really, we need that expertise still.
Yeah, we're not making the infrastructure simpler from that perspective, right? Especially when you start crossing a distributed infrastructure where networking becomes, and this is incredible tech. You can vMotion a server between clouds. That's crazy. Easy to say. Can you imagine what networking has to be set up to transition between those environments? That's vAdmin type of work, and it's a real thing to get going and structured.
Yeah, I think that's a good time to talk about another topic I wanted to discuss in the context of infrastructure. That's infrastructure as code. I think with the SaltStack acquisition, finally VMware is getting serious about it, and they want to go head-to-head with the Terraforms of the world and probably even Ansible on the Red Hat side. So what is your take on that?
Oh, boy. I don't consider SaltStack infrastructure as code.
Okay. Okay.
And so I do think they need to get very serious. In some ways, the SaltStack acquisition was the most muted of the, and they didn't. I don't feel like they had the parade of acquisitions that they had last year. And I feel like the SaltStack acquisition was in some ways very logical for them, but in some ways didn't feel like it moves the needle on a big gap. Right? I've seen some analysis of this is really important in vRealize, and it adds something into vRealize. infrastructure as code to me is much more about a continuously integrated data center experience where you're going from Git to building to deploying to creating repeatable builds and immutable infrastructure and pieces like that. And SaltStack can definitely be part of that story, but it's more of a configuration tool from that perspective. It really hasn't, and they've got great cloud interfaces too, so they can compete with Terraform, they can compete with Ansible from that perspective. But it's not something that I see people really getting, thinking that's the way they're going to approach infrastructure as code, and I think that's a big challenge in market in general. Gina, I'd be interested in your take on that.
I think when I was looking it over, it looked like reading the VMware announcement materials that they were looking at it from a multi-cloud and not including private clouds, like literally how to move things around the different clouds. So this would be a great automation tool for that. Yeah. But listening to you talk about it, like I think that's probably very true, and I think they're probably, I think VMware's probably looking to have like, here is everything VMware, you're all set, you're good to go, right? But that doesn't mean everything else isn't going to work with what they have, and it doesn't mean that they won't work with partners that do very similar things, because I don't think they've always done that. Maybe they're going to change now. I don't know, but it kind of makes sense to me. If they have this very high level, just like they do with VCF, everything's bundled together, you're good, go. And then if you want to do it yourself, okay, whatever, we're the best, but you can do it yourself.
And maybe it's just where we play. I don't see people getting really excited about vRealize as an automation suite. And it's it's felt like a VMware tool and an extension to help make VMware better. But it doesn't have the industry sort of broader, I'm going to crank up my vRealize and write some AWS integrations suite stuff the way I would a Terraform plan or an Ansible script.
But do you think that will change with some AI integration, AI ops kind of features that's coming to be realized? I heard that they are going to use reinforcement learning to sort of automate out, make it a little more autonomic than what it is right now. So do you think with that the whole thing will change?
Everything can change.
Everything, yeah. No,
but I think that's the thing, right? Is a lot of people do use vRealize, and they use what they call the Blue Medora packs to, and I don't know if those still exist, and maybe this is going to replace that. But they use, different add-ons that are specific to the applications and the environments in which they run, right? So if that's what you're using, if that's already what you're using, yeah, you're probably super excited about some of this stuff, especially if it's going to get pulled into vRealize. Because then you'll just have to add on another pack. You're already all set. You've got everything configured. This is how you do things, but I can still use my investment in vRealize to move to the future and manage clouds and manage these automations for the cloud. So, I can see customers, especially vRealize customers, being excited about it.
And one thing to note that's been a disadvantage for the Salt, Chef, Puppet generation of these tools versus, say, the Terraforms and the Ansibles, is that those require a service. They are stateful. They are stateful products, and the extent to which that's built into the systems you have makes them easier to use and manage and control. So, and Terraform we've seen move into a service-based system with what HashiCorp has done with Terraform Enterprise and their cloud offerings. Ansible has been trying to make Tower. Red Hat's been trying to get Tower, which is the Ansible server version. These tools really do need to be services. If you want to do infrastructure as code, they need to be services. They have to be centrally coordinated, or at least coordinated. And so this could be exactly what's needed to help get this next generation of tooling going. Gina, I hope you're right. Adding some AI and some analysis and ease of use pieces into it would make a big difference. This area is ripe for disruption, frankly. The tooling is not actually as good as it needs to be for people to be productive.
Absolutely, I agree. I recently came across a platform called Tuno, tuono.com. They try to sort of like get into the space with their service, and I think there are a few more that are kind of startups trying to attempt something around that space. Okay, I think before we sort of wind down, I think we need to touch another topic, which is edge computing and IoT. I thought VMware was weak on that topic, especially from some of the announcements that came. What do you think it is the case, and what can VMware do to sort of really beef up what their offerings out there, and how can they compete with or how can they take gain some advantage being coming from the private cloud side? How can they gain some advantage taking advantage of edge locations and other IoT devices?
What is the edge, really?
That is $1 million question.
I think, like, I didn't get to watch as much as I wanted to, because I know a lot of the really good edge sessions were buried in the sessions. So I didn't get to see as much as I wanted to. And I think that's probably the hard thing about this being crushed in a couple of days and not being able to run around and follow people and stalk them and go watch their sessions. But I do think that, this is going to go back to how they package it and market it. I think that probably there's a lot to gain from Project Monterey once they get that all together, if they make that super simple. Because, I mean, you think about, you have a programmable NIC, and where can that NIC go? And how big does that footprint have? That'll be funny. How big does a footprint have to be before I can have, a programmable NIC and make it useful? And can those, what kind of locations can those go into? So that could be interesting. I think just the fact that the power of ESXi, I'm gonna keep saying that it is able to go so many places and provide a compute platform. And then when you add it, if you want to add in all the rest of the bells and whistles from VMware being vSAN and NSX, you've kind of got like this mini data center stack. So I think it'll be interesting to see what partners and customers do with these smart NICs, honestly.
Yeah. For my part, I was actually split screen streaming the LF Edge Open Networking and Edge Summit, which was simultaneous with VMworld from that perspective, and watching what's going on. You're right. The telco, the edge was really buried inside a telco, because from VMware's perspective, that's where the edge is hot right now. Right. The telcos, like we were talking about NFV, the telcos really are starting to ramp this up because they're doing 5G build outs and they have a lot of stuff they need to do. And so edge activity for VMware, which is really multi-server infrastructure, is there's plenty to talk about with the telcos. And so I don't think it was missing. I think it's very focused on where they have real value and where they're delivering some things that are really interesting. And I think VMware actually has some really strong stories in Edge from a manageability, partitioning, and capabilities like that. But it's still getting turned out. Meaning people are still building Edge projects. We're still trying to figure out how to build Edge devices. We very clearly are going to have infrastructure on premises in distributed locations. That is the reality that we're facing. How we manage that, how we build applications for it, how we distribute storage, how we secure it, those things aren't really very well understood. And I think VMware is starting to realize that they don't have to do very much to be the center, in the middle of that story. They definitely pulled, Gina was right, they pulled smart NICs into the edge use cases pretty aggressively.
Yeah.
And I think that's a reasonable use case to spell out from that perspective.
I also think that, if we think about, literally we've had VMware for 20 years. We had virtualization in probably the last 12 to 15 years. We know how it works. We know how to do it. It's not something you wouldn't have in most cases. And the reasons are just the things Rob said. It's easier to manage. It's much easier to have different, especially with the new versions of vSphere, much easier to have like pods of things that are specific for different functions in your organization and be able to control things that way. So, and like I said, they have innovated with every single hardware innovation that there is. So yeah, they'd be crazy not to take advantage of what's coming and to make it even simpler. And so that's going to be the thing. It's pretty much theirs to lose, and it kind of is a little sad, but like it's theirs to lose because, you know, do they go all in and only offer everything all together? Do they fix their pricing and packaging, which even they know they need to do? You know, so like how do you do that without everybody abandoning ship? You know, like how do you do that and make your customers very happy still? You know, how do you fix that and be able to carry the technology for it? Because the technology is solid. You're going to have virtualization. The public clouds have virtualization. You just never see it. Somebody manages it all the way down to the ground. Somebody nails it to the ground. So I think that's the thing to think of. This is, if I think about it as just plain old, you know, if I was teaching a class, this is data center, you have virtualization, and now the next stage of computing, this is what it's going to look like. Here's what we see so far. And I think right now we're probably drawing little gray boxes like we did with VMware in the very, very beginning. But like in the next 5 years, it'll be all connected. And then like we're in the retirement homes, man, it's going to be crazy. Like everything we predicted is going to come true. Well, back in my day, I was on the podcast and I told everybody.
I told we were right. I do think they need to think through like their storage stories. There's other components that they need to that have to come together from an edge perspective before I get to, you know, take my wheelchair into the VMware, the VMworld 2040 sessions. But from that perspective, you know, I think edge is super exciting. I think we're going to see a lot of disruption. I think we're gonna see people bringing infrastructure back under their own management. But I don't think it's very tangible for VMware to tell a story there.
Okay.
Is the right thing. And it's got to be about storytelling, right? For VMworld, it's got to be about storytelling.
I don't think the story's that baked yet either, but I can help with it.
Yeah, at least it's not clear to me. Definitely, I agree with you. Yeah, I think we can't talk. Sorry?
I was going to say it's just infrastructure. Getting too baked about edge is the wrong thing to do. It's infrastructure.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be, you know, it's going to be heterogeneous and distributed, and it's going to be different architect. It's just infrastructure.
Totally. Okay, I think talking about VMworld 2040 might be difficult, but we can talk about your expectations for VMworld 2025, when we will still be walking and we don't need wheelchair.
We might even be able to be around people in 2025. That'll be awesome. It'll be live someplace. We'll be all staying in hotels and hugging each other. It'll be great. I think... let's see, do we want to go bold or not? Like,
go bold.
Yep.
I think they'll become more open like they have always been. I think trying to drive customers to have this whole VCF stack is
frozen, I guess.
I think we lost her audio for a moment.
There she is.
Oh, am I still here?
Yeah, you're there.
Yeah, I don't think it's what customers want to have a full stack dictated to them. I think some customers will, but I think customers, especially right now, we're in this really gray area where it's very hard to define what is actually going on. I think customers want the ability to define it for themselves and have the ability to pick what they want to do, which might be all of VMware stack, but it might not be. And I think I think they gotta loosen up that control and that expectation a little bit, and that way. That's the only way to hold on to the workloads they have and the new workloads that are going to be created.
Yeah.
I like your assessment, and I'm going to say something totally opposite.
Good.
I think I like where, you know, I do think it would be nice to see them decouple these pieces into units, but I believe, especially with the supervisory capabilities of SmartNICs and seeing potentially a new generation of server architectures, that what VMware actually needs to be doing is having this stuff be less complex, more integrated pieces altogether. And so what I would like to see in 5 years is actually the next, vCenter 8, right? But in that case, right, it would be deeply leveraging this idea that we have, real supervisory control on the computers as a separate thing, and that we can create composable resources for networking and storage. And at that point, I would love to see this not be, I'd love to not be talking about NSXQ and vSAN 20 and right. I would really like to see this consolidate down into a very simple, logical unit where it didn't require a PhD in vAdmin to make this stuff work. Because what we really should be able to do is drop servers into locations, stack them on top of each other, and have reduce the management burden way down. And so I've been hoping this for 20 years, that we improve operability of the infrastructure that we're dealing with, which I think Gina's right. We're going to go the other direction, but my wish for the 2025 VMworld is that we're showing just how simple it is to actually create a single unit in VMware.
But I think
8, maybe 9.
Who knows? I agree with you. I think our ideas can meld together, because I think that I think what users want, VMware's customers want, is the freedom to choose, and when they choose, that they're not hit by the license bat, but they're able to make it super simple, make it composable, and they're not taxed if they use one and not the other. I think our ideas go together.
I think you're right. The thing that maybe a little fixed in 5 years is the license model for this. It's ridiculous that we're talking about great technology that's basically hidden under a license that makes things hard to consume.
Well, you gotta wonder, right? So like their licensing is based on CPU, right? What happens if I have a smart NIC? And like, I don't, like, what happens? And I know that, I can't remember the details, but I know I worked on a licensing package, especially for customers that were running HPC loads, that gave them a discount so that they could run all the loads, even if they had a tremendous amount of CPUs that had to be licensed. So it's possible. I know they want to do it. I know it's just licensing is the worst.
It's very licensing is way harder than actually writing code. So that's the reality of it. I see, like, for Edge, if they want to win in Edge, they're going to have to figure out a license model that doesn't penalize you for sockets. Yeah. Because you're much more likely to have 10 $1,000 servers than one $10,000 server.
Yeah.
And that's going to mean the VMware licensing costs in that infrastructure is going to be more than the cost of the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Licensing is hard because you got to talk to lawyers.
Well, and you got to read how people's buying patterns, right? This is we've been talking about cloud economics and the 2030 cloud stuff, and that's cloud economics is much more powerful as moving the market than the actual technologies that we're talking about.
Yeah.
I think you brought up the final topic I wanted to briefly discuss here is, can you talk about Cloud 2030? What are you doing, and how can people participate? I know I'm not attending the meetings because I have a team meeting exactly at the same time, but I know it has been going on, and can you talk about how people can get involved in it?
Getting involved is super easy. It's the2030.cloud. If you go to that site, you'll see where we post meetings. You can join, get announcements, share information. Fundamentally, what we wanted to build, and there's a whole bunch of us, Gina's deeply involved in this too, is we wanted the hallways track. So without conferences, we want to be able to sit down and say, let's talk about what's going on. Let's not worry about it being vendored or sponsored. let's think about what the really big issues are going on, right? This tomorrow, Gina's leading programmed inequity, right? Critical thing that you're not going to find a good conference about it. It's something we would talk about in the hallways or dinners or bars around these conferences. And so what we built with the 2030 is this weekly discussion area where people can have these conversations. Anybody can walk in, join it, and then we're driving towards having a bigger summit. We have to schedule that at some point, where we sort of write down what we think is going on. And since it's 2030, it's not so close that we're bound to, like, what's happening in VMworld, what's Project Monterey. We can say, all right, our SmartNIC's going to work. What's the implications in 10 years? And then we bring in guest speakers and have amazing discussions. Gina, did you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, like, this is all based off the thing that I know, Chris, you were involved in hosting several years ago for Cloud 2020, and really good discussions came out. And I think I was one of the only ones that said, wait a minute, you can't just say you're going to do all this stuff. What about all the people of the world that don't get a say in it? So I'm really appreciative of them able to lead this track tomorrow, talking about, great, we can do all these really cool things, but what happens to the people that are actually involved? And can we do things that are harmful to people in society if we're not careful? But that's what I kind of like about the whole space, is there's some really, really smart, amazing, accomplished people in there. And then I'm allowed to go in there and just talk and say whatever I want and ask questions and read and hear what they have to say. So I think it's really important that people who just have ideas about things should come and join us, because it's got to be this kind of diverse. If we're going to build the future, and the future's digitized and driven by AI, we've got to make sure that as many people as possible, a really diverse group of people, are thinking about what should be happening.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I need to do something to get myself available during that time and participate, because the few sessions I attended, I really enjoyed it, and there was a lot of value. I will do something to get myself available. And Rob, you want to add anything more to it?
I was going to say, they're recorded and transcribed, and we have a very lively back channel. So even if you're shy about getting on camera or shy about speaking, because we do have some really distinguished voices in these sessions, it's not hard to participate. It's not hard to come back and have a discussion. And sometimes these things blow up on Twitter, and then we keep those threads going. So Gina's right. We need everybody's voice in this. We really seek to have operators, people who are doing the work. That's why it's not a vendored thing. And
educators too, not just technical people. So educators, anybody that's involved in anything, because if we're going to be all digital, it is going to involve all of us to make some decisions.
Exactly.
Awesome. I think it was a great conversation, folks. Thank you very much for your time, and we will come back and talk about Cloud 2030 in one of the future live streams. Thank you very much. Thanks, Rob. Nice talking to you.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Fantastic.
Bye.
Yeah.